stamina for another big issue.
Yes.
As long as it's less than 8 minutes long. Only kidding.
You have to 8:30.
Boy, are we going to go back and back and back to the beginning. We're going to talk about kindergarten. And I'm very pleased to say that the kindergarten team is in the house. We have almost all of our kindergarten teachers here tonight. And
one extra.
One future.
one future
student.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Aha. Okay.
You can take it off. Pop it.
Thank you. Before Lori and I get started, Mrs. Sutton, as you know, is our Director of Special Services, and we've really collaborated on this. There's not a plan being presented to you that has been decided. This is a concept that we want to share with you. There are always issues that we need to resolve in a school district, and we're presenting to you what the issues are, potential solutions, and possible recommendations, but nothing is going to be decided. This is kind of the first conversation. That's how I'm viewing it, the first conversation. So, can she do two things at one time? Can she do the mouse? She can. Oh, that's a relief. Okay. What we're attempting to accomplish is to meet the individual needs of all of our kindergartners. That's always our goal. In addition, our goal is to reduce the achievement gap. One of the ways to reduce the achievement gap, and as the board members, you know how many times you have funded interventions, we've come to you for interventions, and those things do improve the learning characteristics of those children for that year and sometimes beyond. But the only true way to change is to change what we call the trajectory. Once that child starts and is behind, it's very difficult to change that trajectory that's going flat. The best way to change it is at the very beginning, and that's what this is all about. What can we do at the very beginning so that that achievement gap doesn't even really exist when we get there? If we're able to do that, then we're going to extend the growth for all of our kids. And that's where we are, wanting all of our kids to do well. Our kids come to us, and our kindergarten teachers can certainly attest to this. Kindergartners come to class with all kinds of unique needs because this is really their first time in school. It's the only class in school where they come the first time to public school. They come with emotional needs and social needs. Some of them we know, some of them we don't know. They come with developmental and behavioral delays, some of which we know about, some of which we find out on the first day. They come with special learning styles and patterns. Again, sometimes we know, sometimes not. These are things we need to discover about these children. They also come to us with a wide range of background experiences and verbal development and all of those things that make the range of children who come into kindergarten probably the widest range of any grade level. And I can see our kindergarten teachers nodding their heads. One of the reasons that Mrs. Sutton and I are working on this together is it's all about meeting individual needs. And so she's going to talk to you a little bit about, from the special services perspective, their issues related to meeting individual needs. We're both going to talk about regular ed, special ed, the kinds of needs we have and what our solutions might be.
Good evening, everyone. So just generally with student services, the vision of our department is providing effective student-centered services for all children. So student services should really match whatever the structure is of the general education curriculum. So even right now, looking at how to make improvements in the structure we currently have, if we went to changing our structure here, what would that service delivery look like in a new structure? So as Dr. Stark just said, delivering a system of supports for all students. We've got a very wide range of diverse learning needs in the district. So we've got students who might need special education, gifted education services. We don't have a large population, but we do have a population of students with English as a second language learning needs. We have many students with maybe a short-term need for, or a longer-term need for a Chapter 15 service agreement based on a medical, maybe students with concussions. I mean, it runs the gamut, and I'm talking about all kids in the district. But also kindergartners coming in who have all these needs, and health needs, of course. And there are others. So we want to have student-centered services, and how do we then know? Where do you begin? It all has to be based on assessment information. So you want informal and formal information. This would be a nice way with this model of getting a lot of informal assessment information, and you'll see as we go on. So we're looking at all those domains across all students. So there's something in my field called Child Find. So we should know every child in Bethel Park School District that has a disability, may need specially designed instruction, or gifted education needs. How do you do that? You need to have a mechanism in order to do that. So if we had all of our kindergarten students in this kind of a system, we would be able to do those informal and formal assessment measures. Sometimes it's difficult. We have students that receive early intervention services, and some of our board members, I know, I'm always very appreciative you come to our early intervention night. And it's difficult for our school psychologists sometimes, and our kindergarten teachers could probably attest to this, to really know what do those children need, because you're trying to compare a preschool setting to the kindergarten, and it's not the same. The demands are different, and the staffing configurations are different. So that's something that we would be able to explore a little bit more with this. Least restrictive environment is another concept you often hear. And a new one is something called multi-tiered system of supports. And that's where we can look at a different way of looking at service delivery regardless of the structure of the general ed curriculum. There's a graphic on the next slide. And it's really using universal instruction and interventions for all students. So if you want to take a look at that. It looks kind of confusing, but basically all students fit on this frame, and you have universal instruction for all students, and you accommodate that with specially designed that go up the pyramid, that you often see the pyramid with behavior support, or RTII is another pyramid design. This is MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. And then you have students with more of a low need up to a high need, and looking at what kind of interventions do you apply. So this is kind of a new framework that's out there that we're looking at, and how do we implement that here in Bethel Park. And then finally, my last slide is what are some other considerations? So again, in exploring this as an option, what would the staffing look like? How would we kind of reassign or deploy our special education teachers, paraprofessionals, related service, gifted ed, ESL, etc.? I didn't list everyone on there. What would it look like for students currently in the grades K through 3, who would then be in 1 through 4 the following year, moving to a new building? How would we plan for them? What would those transition needs look like? What kind of parent information would we need? How would we need to address things in the IEPs, GIEPs, other planning, formal planning mechanisms? And then what kind of training needs would need to happen? Looking at more of a co-teaching or collaboration, and more of an interventionist kind of a look to student services. So having the professional not just meeting alone with students in a separate setting, but pushing in, kind of looking at a new model. So we're looking at all of these things in our existing structure, And then what would this look like if we did move into a change? I'll turn it back over to Dr. Stark.
Thanks. So it's all about the uniqueness of kindergarten children. One size does not fit all in terms of interventions, as Mrs. Sutton was talking about. They may need things like flexible programs and flexible scheduling. They may do better with adapted learning strategies that need different spaces. The intervention services that are available for kids in all domains in one building provide more opportunities for focused interventions than when we have kindergartners all around the district and specialized services in different locations throughout the district. That's part of the problem. And Janet, if you, okay. So in the current K-4, we have some program flexibility, but not a lot of program flexibility. We don't have room space to do much different in terms of how we organize around kindergarten classes. Our most intensive interventions are located, we have life skills at Washington, we have autistic support at Penn and Franklin, we have ESL at Memorial. What if it's a Lincoln child who needs life skills support? We know, kindergarten teachers know, Cindy Buckley knows, those parents do not want that child to have to go to another school because of their needs. That's part of the issue with having all of the kindergartners all around the district. The other area in our current approach is that in order to get those intensive services for our children, we have to identify them. We have to, in essence, label them at a very early point when we're not really ready to do that. The early assessments that we use on children who are coming out of early intervention and coming into kindergarten for the first time, those assessments have a small number of items, and so the reliability of the information is not as clear as it would be in second grade or third grade or fourth grade. So that early labeling process to get intervention is a problem for 5-year-olds. If we would go in the direction of a kindergarten center, which we feel provides solutions for many of the problems, if we would go in the direction of a kindergarten center, we have maximum program flexibility. We would have that whole continuum of interventions, all exceptionalities, all levels of treatment for those exceptionalities in the context of one building. And then the decisions about programming and placements, if needed, could be made at the end of a year, at the end of the kindergarten year, once there has been that year of getting to know the children, trying different interventions, seeing what levels of intervention are needed, and making decisions about programming. So we're just going to take a few minutes to look at the numbers, the logistics. That's the idea. That's the proposed solution for some of the problems we're seeing. So Janet, if you will, we're going to take a minute and look at enrollments. The 2015-16 enrollments are under the orange columns. You can see the enrollment for each grade level and how many sections. If you go over to the blue columns, those numbers are just one grade advanced from this year's numbers. So this year's kindergartners are next year's first graders, this year's first graders are next year's second graders, and so on. To come up with a projected enrollment for kindergarten, I merely took an average of all of the other enrollments at the other grade levels. This may be high, it may be low, it's hard to say right now. If you take a look at the numbers, you'll see that there's a pretty strong variance in the enrollment from year to year and the number of sections we need. Typically, we have 14 sections of each grade level, and so as you look down the center column there, we would still need 14 sections of kindergarten. We probably wouldn't need as many sections of first grade. We'd need almost 14 for second grade. Definitely with this year's second grade enrollment, we'd need our 14 sections for third grade, and then fourth grade is down a little bit. The highlighted numbers in yellow show you the difference in the number of sections that we need this year and the number of sections, K-4, that we would need next year. You can see that it's down by a few. Now that could change any August of the year when we get our new enrollments, but it does tend to lead us to believe that there's some flexibility in staffing from this year to next year. And hold on to that thought because that's an important one in addressing how we could move in this direction. Janet? Now, what can work and what makes the most sense if we had a kindergarten center at William Penn is to have 2 3-section buildings, that would be Lincoln and Memorial, and 2 4-section buildings, that would be Abraham, Ben Franklin, and George Washington. This takes a look at the room numbers, how many classrooms we have, both big and small. There's room in both buildings, and if you would like this, I can certainly give you a copy of this. I didn't really want to put anything in print yet because this is so conceptual, and I know there are people who have strong feelings about it one way or the other, and this is really just an idea night. We have plenty of classrooms to handle all of the sections in both Franklin and George Washington. At Washington, we'd have to move a few rooms, but there are plenty of rooms to accommodate the 4 sections and still have the rooms needed for the learning support classes, the life skills support, the computer lab, art, music, library. All of those things are still there. Okay, let's go on to the next one, Janet. Lincoln and Memorial, one of the situations that we have to address is what to do with the special education classes that are at William Penn. We have autistic support, both primary and intermediate at William Penn. And we have the classroom numbers, to relocate those services to Abraham Lincoln. Memorial would actually end up with several extra classrooms. It would certainly be a bonus for the district to have extra classrooms anywhere. So 2 3-section buildings, Lincoln and Memorial. 2 4-section buildings would be George Washington and Ben Franklin. Okay, one more, Janet. Now, when we look at what the impact of such a change would be on these buildings that are going to be for grades 1 through 4, Washington and Franklin do lose a couple of extra spaces. Memorial picks up some extra spaces, but there's room for everything. If we eliminate what is a very labor-intensive grade level from each of the buildings and put it in a unique kindergarten center, then the focus of the other services in the buildings that are 1st through 4th is improving for the children who were there in those grade levels. The 2 autistic support classrooms moved to Lincoln, which can really be a benefit. Right now, we have all of the services on the other side of the district. If we kept the Franklin services and had 2 classrooms of services at Lincoln, then we at least cover geographically. It's a little more appealing to parents when we have services that are needed in those grade levels. Art and music would have 1 less building to travel to. It doesn't mean we'd eliminate positions, because we still have the same number of sections. What it does is it eliminates time on the road and more service time in the buildings. So we wouldn't see a reduction there. Really, all things considered, there's very little impact to 1st and through 4th. The big impact, of course, would be with kindergarten. Okay, so let's just stop for a minute. How are we doing time-wise? And really look at what this would mean for William Penn. William Penn has 15 full-size classrooms, and we have needs for full-size classrooms for other than grade level classes. If you look at the center column there, we need a computer lab, a library. We need a learning support room. We would still need that in a kindergarten center. We also feel strongly that a kindergarten center would need daycare, so that parents would be able to solve their problem of childcare during the kindergarten year. We wouldn't have the issue of trying to locate the services in little pockets around the district. We would have localized kindergartners with localized daycare needs, parents whose problems would be solved. So what we're considering, is that one of those large rooms would be a daycare and the other one might be a sensory room or any other purpose. There are myriad purposes for the spaces there. But that essentially leaves us with 10 kindergarten classrooms. We have the options of half-day kindergarten. We have the option of full-day kindergarten, which is certainly something our parents have been really pushing us for, full-day kindergarten. We also have the option for extended day kindergarten, which, if you're not sure of the distinction, when we have children in a regular ed kindergarten class and they're doing well and they're getting what they need, fine. What about the children who are in that half-day kindergarten class, and there are still things that they need beyond that, significant amounts of things? If we can identify those children and give them an additional half-day of kindergarten, then we've given them reteach time, we've given them developmental gross motor time with academic concepts. So the half day, the full day, and the extended day all give us flexibility of options that we don't currently have. Some children do very well with a half day of kindergarten. Some children really don't need a full day of kindergarten. Some children really benefit from a full day of kindergarten. So how can we, as a district, how can we plan for those needs when we have pockets of kindergartners all over the district? That's the issue. Now, I color-coded this so you'd have a look at what this meant. We have 9 kindergarten teachers. Currently, 4 of them are half-day, and 5 of them are full-day. If we kept half-day kindergarten, we would remove 4 of those top. If we kept the half-day teachers, is what I meant to say, we would remove 4 of those top gold boxes. If, on the other hand, we would have our kindergarten teachers move to full-time instead of half-time, then we would have all of those sections. You see, that's 12 sections of half-day kindergarten. Then we would have room and staffing to have possibly 2 sections of full-day kindergarten. And if we threw the reading specialist into the mix, we could have 1 kindergarten teacher teaching extended day and another extended day being taught by reading specialists. Now, I can tell you that the kindergarten teachers and I have not talked about this, so this is theoretical and this is hypothetical. This is one way that it can work. There are lots of ways it can work. One of the situations that we want to be clear about is that our kindergarten teachers would have to be involved in developing these plans and kind of giving that conceptual look at how many of each section, each type of approach we would need, and look at the flexibility. We could have multiple full-day classes. We could have multiple learning support classes if that's what we needed. Each year, we could determine what we needed to meet the needs of our students in terms of the types of programs that we would offer. The half-day kindergarten program, the half-day plus extended day program, or the full-day program. There's flexibility there that we don't have. Kindergarten students, you know, the issue of not being in one building for 5 years is less of an issue. Imagine the kindergartners, they're going to meet their lifelong friends that first year. I don't see that as a negative for them, I see that as a positive. They would be able to choose among flexible program options based on their needs, all there, all there. No dilemmas about where they have their needs met, no dilemmas about what parents are willing to do in terms of relocating. The success potential for children in that setting goes up when their needs are met. The confidence that comes with student success starts that trajectory going right where it has to go, and the opportunities for that gap, that achievement gap, are reduced substantially. Janet? Okay, parents, I know some parents aren't going to like the idea of William Penn becoming a kindergarten center because they know William Penn and they like William Penn. I was there, I liked it too. Things change when we see needs that need solutions, and this is a solution to some problems we're seeing with our student achievement. Parents could choose among flexible programs. They would see their children being successful. They would have daycare solutions for their current problems. The details about PTO and PTA and how that would work with a kindergarten group and a first grade through fourth grade group, we saw when we redistricted previously, the transition for that experience was excruciating until it actually happened. And then it was mild, it was relatively painless. People who worked in one PTO organization found a wonderful place in another PTO organization. When we're solving problems for kids, that really has to be, that's what this is about, presenting you with solutions for kids. And
That's a key point there, Dr. Stark. Redistricting, how does this affect that issue? Because we're approaching another point of time.
yes, we are.
With redistricting, with the building of houses and the shifting of
Right,
some of our
and we
students.
see out at Lincoln, for example, we have another plan of homes coming in. 50 homes, could be 100 children. There's
So have
currently.
you looked at this?
Well, this would be
in
part of,
regards to-
if we can consider this option and move forward with increasing levels of detail, one of the levels of detail would be how we redistrict. Because it wouldn't be as wholesale as last time, but it would certainly involve every building.
Could I interject here, too?
Yes.
Because I was the face of the redistricting last time, and it was painful for the parents whose streets were being moved. And actually, this is something to consider as a plus of the model of having a kindergarten center and only 4 elementary buildings, because under a 4-section and a 3-section model of grades 1 to 4, we have more flexibility within the current, within the redefined structure to move kids within sections within a building, as opposed to having to move them to different buildings. When we divide kids by 5 groups instead of by 4 groups, there's a whole lot more shifting going on a steady basis. One of the things that it took us 2 years to redistrict last time, and after 2 years, it was almost a moot point because we were back to having uneven numbers in classrooms
Right.
again. I know that people are concerned about a transition from kindergarten to a 1st grade through 4th grade building as an additional transition, but I would tell you that every year children transition from preschools to kindergartens and do it seamlessly. Might have a few tears from a few children on the first day, but for the most part they successfully do that. The largest issue I see here in terms of a reason to not do it is tradition. And I don't know if that is enough of a reason to keep the model that we have. This has been a dream for a long time for some of us. I'm talking 5 years of concentrating services for our entry-level students. We've talked about different models of K-1-2 buildings, and I understand that the ideas of shifting over multiple years. And so this was a revised option for us. But to concentrate those services, to have collaboration between our kindergarten teachers in working with kids and solutions, the flexibility of having children be able to flow between programs and services just seems like a great opportunity. We have not talked to the kindergarten teachers yet, and I know you're grumbling and upset, and the reason that we have not is because before we brought this to you as a potential, we needed to see if the board was interested in this direction. And so in order to do that, we needed to present the idea. So if the board gives us direction about whether or not this is something that they want to pursue, then we will be coming to you for specific frameworks for how it would proceed. But these are my bosses and essentially your bosses who employ all of us and would determine the direction. They are elected officials who are given that grave responsibility for designing the programming and structure of our schools. So with their support and with our recommendations, hopefully we can come to terms about whether or not this is a viable thing. I am concerned about shifting populations every couple of years and having if you live on one of those border streets, you don't know from year to year whether your kids are going to Washington or Memorial or Penn. Moving kids from Franklin to Penn a few years ago was a great upheaval for the students and their families. We don't want to keep having that happen year after year. Dawn, I believe you lived on one of those swing streets when your kids were going to school, so you know that upheaval. In a 3-section and 4-section building, we have much more flexibility for maintaining kids in their families in residential zones. Okay.
One of the reasons that kindergarten is the most vulnerable in this particular area of class size and enrollment is that very often we don't know how many children are going to be in kindergarten until the middle to the end of August. And so we have kindergartens in one part of the district that have 23 children, and then we have 14 in a classroom at Washington. We have to do something to create equity of the services for these incoming kids. And so my hope is that you have an open mind about this and can consider what the problems are and what the solutions might be. And it would certainly be my pleasure to move into a planning phase with our kindergarten staff, but I know you probably will need more information. I do have, Janet, if you could go to the next slide. Oh, no, you skipped one. Oh, I'm sorry. The issue of transportation has come up. I've gotten sort of ballpark indications from Scott Zieler. He feels that in order to minimize the amount of time on buses for kindergartens coming from one end of the district to the other, that he would need to add bus routes at each of the first through fourth buildings. So that would be a total possible maximum of 8 bus runs. But it could be accomplished with the current number of drivers and the current buses. No new buses would be needed. It would be new routes. And of course, there is an expense when adding routes, but until we would actually map it out, it's hard to really put a dollar figure on that. We would possibly have to add, he thought up to 3 midday runs, but maybe less than that, for the distance of making the loop. If the board members aren't aware, the kindergarten children leaving in the morning get on a bus, they travel into their home area, the bus driver picks up the PM kids and brings them back all in one big loop. And some of those loops would be a little too large to do in a timely fashion to get them back by 1 o'clock. So, but the other part of that is with daycare offerings, we would probably have more children who did not go home. So it's hard to know if we would actually need 3 additional noontime routes or not. But no new buses and no new drivers. Janet, one last page. There are options for staffing changes. We could have the half-time kindergarten teachers go to full-time teachers to add flexible options. That certainly isn't a requirement of having a kindergarten center. It probably would require that the current librarian, who's half-time librarian, half academic support, would probably need to be a full-time librarian because there would be 14 sections. She currently doesn't have quite that many, and with this many sections of kindergarten, we would need probably to have her be full-time librarian. And in special education, the learning support and speech would stay at Penn, and the autistic support would move to Lincoln. These are just possibilities for how this could work out. This is certainly not something that is carved in stone. Obviously, this is just at the idea stage. One last slide, one last thought to leave you with. These little ones who come into us are unique. They need something that is unique to help meet their needs. One size does not fit all. They need flexible programming. They need adaptations from an array of intervention providers, and they need a continuum of those interventions in their building, not across town, in their building. And that's our primary purpose, is to solve that problem for our 5-year-olds. So,
There's one other point that I want to bring up right now, because we don't have enough options for parents with kindergarten and daycare options and cross-district runs. A lot of parents are choosing to place their kindergarten-age children in parochial schools or charter schools. This year alone, I'll use last year's figures because those are firm. We had 5 students that enrolled in Young Scholars, and that cost us approximately $80,000 because some of those students were special needs. More frightening, though, is the long-range potential of that. If a parent moves into a charter program, their child becomes comfortable there, they don't want to move them for the following year, and those become elementary age students for 4 or 5 years in that charter program, and that becomes $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 per child over the career of that child in the elementary program outside of the district. So that's something that I want you to consider as well. We think that for those parents who are frustrated with a lack of options in their community schools for the kindergarten, that half day, that we might be able to entice many of those parents to remain in the district as well. So.
Are you saying that the district would provide the daycare?
What we are doing currently is allowing before and after school care with a contracted service. It's the parents' contract, they're using our spaces. They have a contract to use our facilities. We would do the same thing, providing a morning and afternoon option for kindergarten students for the parents who need to drop off early before school starts. The child would be in daycare until their session would start, whether morning or afternoon, and vice versa for the afternoon with after-school care.
If the board would do this, would the kindergartners in the one location be segregated into different groups according to abilities and needs?
Certainly not according to abilities. We haven't done that in a long time. We have our children in flexible groups according to their needs. We watch their performance and try to make adjustments in the interventions and the groupings to meet their current level of performance, and that shifts a lot through the year. We don't do blackbirds and bluebirds anymore. We shift our flexible groups so that we don't have somebody who's left in the blackbird lowly group for his whole life, even though he's gotten a little bit better. So
they would be segregated according to needs then?
Well, we consider it much more flexible. Right now we have inclusive classrooms, and we would continue to have inclusive classrooms. With an option like this, we would be able to have services come into the classroom to meet needs more readily than we're able to do now. And the children's range of needs, some of them would need to be pulled out, as we have in any grade level. But in this level, most of them would probably have push-in services. And they wouldn't be strictly in classrooms. Each classroom would still have a range of needs. All of those half-day kindergarten classrooms would still be balanced classrooms. Now the extended day classrooms, those would be classrooms for children who need that additional half day of kindergarten, assuming this would make it through the plan, of course, but for those children who need that additional half day of kindergarten to meet exceptional needs. But the half-day kindergartens and the full-day kindergartens, if we were fortunate enough to get that, those would all be balanced classrooms as we do now. Balanced boys and girls, balanced behavior and non-behavior, balanced in terms of academic performance so far.
But if we allocate the kindergarten students the same way we are now, if they aren't segregated according to needs, according to the services they need, then we're simply going to have all those services divided among 11 classrooms in one building rather than divided by 11 classrooms in several buildings.
Well, understand, though, that this would be flexible. If we had a large number of students who had unique needs, to put them all together in one room is not generally productive for those students. There would be services that come and go the way there are services that come and go now. We could do some groupings based on need, but those would probably need to be flexible throughout the year because needs change. When you talk about hard and fast groupings, it wouldn't be advantageous for the struggling learners to be in a room full of struggling learners only. So we try to maintain that inclusive presence while also grouping for needs. We could group across rooms. If we have 6 kids in one room and 6 kids in another room that need something unique, we can flexibly group and pull them out as we need to. We can't do that now.
So if I understand what you're saying, then the rationale behind this is with all of the kindergartners in one building, you could switch them back and forth between classrooms throughout the year?
Or
we would have the
programs.
flexibility.
Or programs.
I'm sorry?
not necessarily
classrooms,
physical
programs.
spaces, but programs or services.
Programs and services would be flexible. Classrooms would have some measure of flexibility that they can't have now. And as needs developed over the year, we would have to make decisions in group teamwork like we always do. What do these children need? What's the best way to group to meet the needs? Are they temporary needs that have to do with academic gaps? Are they long-term needs in terms of developmental issues for the whole kindergarten year? What should we do with these children? We currently don't have a lot of flexibility. Right now, if we find out a child after the first week or 2 weeks or month of school has exceptional needs, we have to go through IST for a lengthy period of time, and then we have to wait for that child to be evaluated. It can take a semester, it can take a year, it can take longer than that. Meanwhile, those exceptional interventions are not available to that child till there's an identification and a label and a program. We're suggesting that if we have special education teachers, and Lori can flesh this out in more greater detail, but if we have special education teachers who can meet the needs of a child on the spectrum, as well as meet the needs of a child who seems to be in the life skills category, then we don't have to determine at the outset of that child's school experience that that's their program and that's their label and that's where they go. We can have those services be flexible within the building so that needs are met without that process of premature labeling of children for
To
programs.
give a concrete example, a child with some challenges might be in a typical kindergarten in the morning and then move into an extended classroom for the afternoon and vice versa. Would you say that would
Yes.
be
Or move from a typical classroom in the morning to a learning support classroom in the afternoon. Or have a typical classroom in the morning and go to an extended day where the learning support teacher can come in there and offer more services. It's so flexible that it's hard to imagine not offering this to children, frankly, but that's kind of where I am.
If I may. One question, why, maybe to come at this from the other extreme, why is this only good for kindergarten? The way you've described it, there's probably services, additional services are required at all grades. Why wouldn't this be a model for all grades? And what differentiates a kindergarten?
Well, we wanted to do it for all grade levels, and the board was really unhappy with that option. We wanted to have K-1-2 centers and 3-4 centers so that we could have that flexibility in one building to meet needs. Okay. But frankly, the uniqueness about kindergarten has to do with the fact that they're coming to school for the first time, and we don't know anything about them. Okay. So their needs are played out over that first week, 2 weeks, month of school. Sometimes with early intervention kids, we know when they come in that they have a certain list of pre-existing disability areas or developmental areas, but very often we don't know when they come. The first day of school, we start to get an inkling, and then we're often running and trying to provide for them. That's the difference in kindergarten.
If I may, I'm sure the kindergarten teacher won't be surprised that I have a whole lot of thoughts in my brain. I am sitting here with an open heart and an open mind, listening to all the data and information that you have shared, and I appreciate the fact that you ladies have done so much work with this. I sit here wearing different hats as a former kindergarten and first grade teacher for 36 and a half years, 6 years on the board, so I'm the oldest person in the room with that many years.
I don't think.
I have statistics that I have saved. You folks know me, I save it all. I have statistics dating back to when Dick Rose was on the board, and we looked at this before some of these folks sitting at the table or some of the people in the audience were even employed in the district. So I could pull all that information out, and we can gather all that. I'm sitting here feeling overwhelmed, but I'm listening. Right. I'm overwhelmed as a parent, although I don't have any kindergarten kids anymore, obviously. I'm overwhelmed as a former kindergarten teacher, and my question is, what are you thinking as far as a timeline if the board would say, well, let's take a closer look at this? But I also think as part of that timeline, and I mean this in a very respectful manner, you folks are the administrators and you know your things, you've presented that, but the kindergarten teachers here sitting tonight need to be very, very, very involved
Absolutely.
with the process.
That really is without question the core of the
Okay.
planning
And
process.
the parents need to be involved, because when we've looked at this in the past and we've studied the full day versus half day and all those things that we've done before, that was the process that we took. And I'm not saying you're not going to do that. I'm just saying that that positively needs to be done.
Of course it would, right.
This, in my opinion, has some positive things, but it is overwhelming at this point. So what is your timeline? If the board says, okay, let's take a look at it, what are you
Really, the
thinking?
timeline is something in response to your needs. If there's some more information you'd like me to gather as
Oh,
part
yes.
of,
Yeah,
as
I
part of.
respectfully ask that we have the data that you've presented tonight, because you know
Yes,
me, I
I
can
will.
study those numbers.
I will.
Okay.
But having said that, this is just a way to map out how it could work. This isn't a plan, you know, so I wouldn't want it to be shared like it's the plan.
I'll keep it private, but as far
Okay.
as the plan, are you thinking a year down the road, 2 years down the road?
Well, I think the other part of this is that redistricting idea. I think we still have
That's
to
another
look at
piece
the
of that puzzle.
numbers, because we're going to have to move lines
Right.
again
Yes, we are.
soon.
Right.
And if we're going to go in this direction, I don't like moving lines and then moving lines again
Right.
and then moving lines again.
We'd
So I
need to
think
do it as
that
one.
has to be
Right.
part and
A huge
parcel
piece of it.
it all, whatever it is. But I mean, we knew that was, I think that's what set you maybe partially on looking at this, was that we knew we were starting to get those numbers out of sync again between buildings.
Yes,
I-
that's true. Yes,
I would
that's
like-
true.
I would like to piggyback on what Barry said. There's efficiencies by doing this with all grades, you know, having all the third graders in one building, all the fourth graders. Nancy alluded to that by saying it's easier to balance between 4 buildings and 5 buildings. However, Bethel Park, we've had our local schools, and the local grade school has been something that parents valued.
Right.
We need input from parents.
Yes.
How are the kindergarten parents going to feel about having to ship their kid, you know, from Washington School clear over to Lincoln or someplace like that? I mean, okay, you said to everybody would go to William Penn, but the fact of the matter is kids are going to be traveling further. They aren't going to be in their own locale. So we need input from parents.
I agree. I think, yes, I agree, absolutely. And in terms of timing, however much time that would take is the time that we would have to plan for.
Just
I mean,
as with redistricting, I want to caution you, and we do want input from parents. We do want to meet with the teachers if the board wants to even entertain this idea, and that's what we're presenting tonight. Do you want to even think about this format?
Russ has a
I
question.
just caution you that, you know, redistricting itself was a very emotional issue. And I anticipate that this is going to be emotional for teachers to leave the buildings that they have a comfort level in their teaching peers and colleagues that they've come to rely on for years. It's also going to be emotional for families that are sending their kindergarten children to a different building, perhaps, than their older children. So the perspective is going to be limited to the place where you sit in this situation.
There is one difference,
So,
though, Nancy.
yes.
And that difference is redistricting is something that has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something that has to be done.
Well,
Well,
Russ,
we're
go
gonna
ahead.
have to keep redistricting if we don't take some measure, and I just want to caution you that the redistricting lines are going to continue to change over 5 buildings more
Grab this if
extensively.
you wanna say anything.
And some of this is going to be projection as to how many kids are coming in to Lincoln with the new construction as well. So it is going to be a moving target for a while.
Russ.
I think it'll be a
First
moving
comment,
target
I
forever.
think Mrs. Buckley was at the redistricting meeting, Neil with myself
Yes,
and
dear.
Mr. Sustich.
Yeah, I was at the
And-
front of that,
You remember that? And,
Yes.
painfully.
That was like pulling teeth without any medicine. It was really difficult. My comment, or my question is, where, can you point us in the direction of districts or areas that have done this already, and what's their success rate? What comments have they made? Where has that gone?
We can do that. Nancy, are you writing that down? We can, that would be part of what we did the last time too. Whenever we're suggesting a change, we check in with the other districts and see what their experiences have been. Also keep in mind one little other seed to plant. We have children coming into our schools now that are very different in some ways from the children coming into our schools 15 and 20 years ago.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah,
And,
that's a true
and
statement.
not just in terms of socioeconomics
No.
and cultural issues, but in terms of the needs, the unique needs of children. The children coming into our schools have extensive needs. And that year, to kind of sort out what they really need from what they appear to need the first day they were screaming coming into kindergarten, you know, it takes a while to really determine what kids truly need. And that's part of the issue with the struggle in kindergarten to really meet needs. That's part of the issue.
You know,
Barry?
Dr. Stark, the reason why I asked my question before is, you know, what's the, you know, how would this benefit the other classes? That if you only do this in kindergarten, you know, do you receive, what benefit do you receive downstream in grades 1 through 4? You know, is it worth doing it in kindergarten if you're going to lose the benefit, if you're going to lose the access to that specialized, you know, additional support?
There are a couple of ways to look at that. First of all, we would still have our neighborhood schools. The kindergartners wouldn't be in it, but we would still have our neighborhood schools that parents focus on 1st through 4th. The board previously did not want to entertain multiple transitions. Certainly we would never do all of 4th grade in one building, all of 3rd grade. They'd be changing every year. The issue of trajectory is where I'd like you to think about what happens when children get off to that start that has success from the beginning, so that they aren't starting off with that delayed time to meet needs. They aren't starting off with not having intensive needs. They're starting off with the needs that are best for them, so that their 1st grade experience, their 2nd grade experience, their 3rd grade experience, that achievement gap from research, and we all have our own places that we research, but the achievement gap can be reduced drastically if we just start them in that initial point. So it affects all of the grade levels to follow. It's going to affect meeting state standards by 3rd grade because they're going to start off. Imagine if you start off behind, you're going to make progress. Your trajectory is going to be going up a little bit because you have interventions here and there, but you're not going to catch up to the kids who were at the get-go. Fine. You know what I mean? That's really where.
One other thing, I forgot to mention this before. Before my days on the board, I sat on the Citizens Curriculum Committee, and I know we've
I was on that with you, Russ.
and I've heard a lot of the,
That one.
you know, it's like a time, I guess a time frame. Let's just put it that way. At one point in education, everybody thought it was 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 1st, 2nd, whatever it was, and it's changed over those 10, 15 years. So this is today, what's tomorrow? You know, I mean, is that going to change again where, like to Barry's point or your point about all 2nd grade, all 3rd grade, I know it's not going to happen, but to me, it just seems like it's a you spin the wheel and see where it stops.
Well, I don't know how to address that exactly. I don't think it's arbitrary. I think that we have,
But educational thinking keeps changing, right?
and it takes a while for
But
that
that's
to
not a bad
happen.
thing.
No, I didn't say it was
It is
bad.
that- It is that
But
we
it's
change
just-
things,
yeah.
we have to be fluid to
Right.
make the changes.
When we make a change that's as significant as this, we certainly wouldn't be planning to change again anytime soon. But we have to look at the reality of who needs what and how to meet that need, and this is a solution. I have to say, despite the fact that I loved the K1, 2, 3, 4 idea personally and for kids, I do see the value of the neighborhood school and that kind of cohesiveness that it builds in Bethel Park. And that's something to be valued, and nobody's suggesting that we get rid of that. So I wouldn't see this kind of break the mold change on and on and on. I wouldn't see that.
Mrs. Dobas, you've been
Pam?
waiting patiently.
Sorry.
From everything you've said educationally, this really makes complete sense to me. I just love the idea of parents having all of those options. I think that many of the parents in our community are working parents who have children at various daycares, and now they don't have to worry about, well, I'm in this daycare, I have to go to this school, or I have to be in this daycare in order to go to this school. So their first year in the system, they'll be transported to one school. Also, I like the idea of the fact that we can offer parents options for extending the child's educational day if it is needed in that extended kindergarten class or learning support. That you mentioned earlier that kids come to us with such a range of abilities really sort of astounded me for a minute, you know, and then I was thinking, what about all the nursery schools in our community? Can we like ask them to like follow a certain curriculum so that they all come to us prepared, and you can't?
Well, we try, actually, the pre-K counts program, we established a firm transition between that program and our kindergarten programs, but that's only 30 kids.
Right, right.
And
And there are,
The other
there
thing
are
is some
other
of our
day-
most needy kids aren't in nursery school
Right.
programs, aren't in
right,
daycare.
and so
don't have a
I was
preschool.
wondering, what kind of screening do we do for when they register for kindergarten? Is it just like eye and vision and
No, no.
and that kind of a thing, or do we do an academic screening?
We do a minimal academic screening, and we do not use it to prevent children from coming to kindergarten. We just use it, you know, letter sounds, letter identification, letter sounds, that sort of thing. We use that just to have an idea of how to build the classrooms. We don't want to have the classes all stacked with kids who knew no letters. We have some kids coming in who don't know letters, who've never held a pencil. We have other kids coming in reading War and Peace. I mean, it's really tough in Bethel Park.
War and Peace?
No, Little House, no. I think Little House on the Prairie is probably the biggest one I've
Or
seen.
Peace at Sesame
Well-
Street.
Well, so during that first month of school, are the teachers continually performing assessments so that we then can recommend special services within, like, the month of September? Because it seems to me, for planning purposes, we're going to have to figure this out soon in the year.
Well, any one of the kindergarten teachers can probably address that if you want to. Anybody want to? I'm happy to do it if you don't, but kindergarten teachers can probably tell who's going to have a problem the first day, most of the time. Most of the time. And not that they have the evidence to back it up, but they have the gut to back it up because they've been doing it for a long time. Generally, we don't refer children to IST in kindergarten until at least a month or two or longer, because there's this popular notion that they need settling in time. Well, you know, you lose time in that process too. But we need a better approach to how to make the intervention responses more immediate. And with our current system of IST covering K to 4, it just, you know, the first priority coming in at the beginning of the year is our PSSA kids who didn't do well, and so on and so on and so on. So,
Of the 4 topics that we presented tonight, and I respectfully listened in that this is an idea from you folks as far as the realignment, but the other 3, there was committee involvement. So if the board would think about and be willing to entertain the idea of moving forward, not to make a decision, and that has to be very clear, but to investigate a decision. But the kindergarten teacher as a whole, the committee, and the other staff involved as far as the speech teachers and everyone else, they have to be a part of
Right.
this. And being involved, I think the statistics need to be studied. I mean, there are so many pieces of this. Right now, I'm
Right.
feeling extremely overwhelmed. But
it's a huge idea.
yes, it is.
It's a huge
and,
idea.
But again, the most important thing I can see this evening is involve the kindergarten
Right.
teachers. You just credit them with the fact that they can make a decision based on the first day of knowing a child, and I agree with that. Not with all children, but many, many
Yeah.
times. Come on, folks, it's true. However, for them not to be involved in more than what has happened tonight, I think we need positively to make that number 1. And
Well,
the parents, too. Don't ignore the parents,
I-
because this impacts them greatly. So
I
please
would
don't
not
ignore
have
the
taken
parents.
that step without having some sort of approval from the board first to even engage the
But
notion.
again, as I said, if I raise my hand and say, yes, pursue it, that doesn't mean that I'm going for it. It means that I'm listening, and I'll study it along with you if I may, if I'm allowed to do that.
Okay.
And, but there's a whole lot of work to be done
Yes.
before a decision is made,
Yes.
in my opinion.
Russ?
Yes.
One other comment real quick. I hate to be the one to bring up this particular word, but the word budget has to be considered.
There's
And
a timeline with that.
as you move forward, we need to really have a really where the impacts are gonna be, what it's gonna cost to move forward. Not that that should always be our final decision, but it's obviously a very large part of any decision that we make.
This is really, and I think Mrs. Buckley said it clearly, this is really a request to be able to pursue this. And,
I would prefer the word study as opposed to pursue, because to me, when you say you're pursuing,
okay,
that means
study.
it's a go.
I like study.
I prefer study.
I like
Look at-
study.
I'm thinking as far as the kindergarten teachers taking a big piece of manila paper, folding it in half and putting the pros and the cons, and start writing them tonight because you won't be able to sleep. I know that, because I'm not going to be able to sleep either. So I respect what you folks do and how hard you work, but I think we need to have a starting place.
And I think the research shows, too, though, that early intervention is the key
Oh, positively.
anymore. And if this is
No one
going
disagrees
to
with
allow that early intervention, I think that we should study it also.
Bingo. Thank you, thank you.
Well, and I think that, you know, the other thing is, how does early intervention is probably required regardless of how many buildings you have. Now,
Right.
how is it more effective to implement it under this approach versus the current approach? So you have to build a case each
Right.
step of the way
Right.
to say that, hey, under scenario A, we think it's better than the current situation. And that's how I think the board has to make a decision also. Because there's going to be the performance projections, but then at some point, the cost is going to factor
That's
in
another
also.
piece of
And
it
so-
that got-
But you need to be able to compare A versus B. to
yes,
see-
indeed. So do we need to wait for a vote from the board to study it? Or
No.
is this authorization
I
to
think
study
We
it?
have 5 members who are in favor of studying this issue a little further.
Yeah.
Then I
Yes.
believe we can give them the go-ahead to
It's-
begin
it's-
that
I'm sorry.
study.
Yeah, with the idea to study it, to take a look at it, but it's not a go. I don't want anyone to leave this room and think, okay, this is
No.
what Bethel Park is doing.
We-
And
we
also
just-
Russ
We
is,
just have a lot more information that we
a
are
whole lot.
requiring at this point
Yes,
in
dear.
time to even talk
Study
about
it.
Study it.
Study it.
And in bold letters, no decisions for a long time.
So when Mrs. Floda records the minutes of what took place tonight, okay, it's clear that we will be studying,
We are studying.
studying
I'll
this.
start my list as far as all the study things that I'm thinking of, just because that's the way my brain is thinking right now. But I like Russ's idea, too, that are there other districts that have pursued it this way?
That would be part of studying
That
it.
would be a part of the study.
Okay,
But the
Okay.
key studiers, if there's such a word.
They're sitting right
are
over
those
there.
folks right there.
that's right.
Thank
Agreed. Okay, thank you very much for listening.